Welcome to the Base Path Podcast, brought to you by New England Baseball Journal. I'm your host, Dan Guttenplan. The high school baseball season is upon us, and covering the MIAA Massachusetts high school baseball scene for us this year will be Pat Donnelly. Pat, thanks so much for joining us in studio.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, this will be your first year on the high school baseball beat for us at New England Baseball Journal. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up with Seamans Media.
Yeah, so not much of like a baseball media guy by trade. My baseball experience growing up was Little League and then a little bit of Babe Ruth before I was like, I'm just going to play hockey now. And so went to BU for college, covered the BU men's and women's teams. Out of BU, covered a little bit of Bruins, a little bit of college hockey. Opportunity here at Seamans to become a writer arose. Cross-brand writer, doing a little soccer in the fall. Hockey's like kind of the bread and butter, and then baseball in the spring. So kind of excited to fully dive back into baseball. Yeah,
and you did a great job, catching back up on that stuff. I know you were in more of the college, pro hockey guy before that. But, yeah, you did a great job on the high school scene, so we're excited to have you on the MIAA beat this year. What kind of background did you do to kind of get yourself ready for the season? I know you're working on rankings and top players, all that type of stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, you were a big help with sort of teams to look at, players to look at, and then obviously just kind of going through last season, sort of seeing how the brackets played out, who won, kind of reading up on that. So it was a lot of background work so far.
Yeah, you know what's funny? I was trying to put together some info for you just to kind of look at. These are some of the top guys. These are maybe like the public school guys who made Team Massachusetts is going to play in the national championship this year. And I was putting together those lists, and you never, when I'm putting together like top players, D1 commits, all that stuff, it never looks like Taunton is going to be back and repeating this year because you're just like, they don't have the horses at some of these other programs, St. John, Shrewsbury, Franklin, those BC High has a lot of D1 commits this year. But somehow Taunton every year is the last one standing. The last 2 years they came in, they won D1 state championships. They still have a Cali back this year, that was so good in the tournament last year. What do you think? What are your thoughts, heading back into this year on Taunton's chances of repeating?
Yeah, I mean, so a little bit of a spoiler here, but I've given them the nod for the top spot in our preseason rankings. Usually you got to give the reigning champs the nod there.
Right.
But, they lose, obviously, Dawson Bryce. He's going to be at Merrimack this season. But Braden Calley's the big one. He hit .435 last year, stole 20 bags, struck out 4 times all season, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Just insane. So if they're like, they're one of those teams that feels like they're just always going to figure it out no matter what.
Right. Yeah, good, really well coached with Blair Bork. Braden Calley was everywhere in the state tournament last year. Like every time you looked up, he was going into second with a double or making a defensive play for them. He was just really a stud. And the team that you probably feel bad for the most with Taunton's reign over the last 2 years is Franklin. Because if it wasn't for Taunton, they'd be a 2-time state champion themselves. Franklin's been in the state championship game 2 years in a row. They have some good players back. They could be right there with Taunton. What do you think about Franklin heading into the season?
Yeah, I saw Franklin last 5 seasons, 105-16, which is just dominance.
Right.
It's
yeah.
honestly surprising that they haven't broken through yet. But they got some key players back. Austin Campbell on the mound. He had a breakout season last year. 106 ERA. Starting shortstop Henry DeGiorgio's back. And the reigning coach of the year, Zach Brown. So Franklin, again, sort of like Taunton, is going to be in the mix at the end of the season no matter what.
Yeah, we've had Zach Brown on the podcast, and he's talked about kind of how he establishes that program from the Little League level all the way through. Guys are training the same way that they train at the high school level, so they know, how do we want to handle situations, what's the approach that we want to take inside the batter's box, what do we want to do in terms of training, conditioning, like all that stuff is pretty streamlined in the Franklin community. You mentioned Henry DeGiorgio. He was just on a basketball team for Franklin that made it to the state championship game. So they have some great athletes. Austin Campbell was a guy who got the win in the semifinal game for them last year. So he's a lot of experience, big-time arms. What about St. John Shrewsbury? I had them as my preseason number one. I don't blame you at all for switching that to Taunton. Like you said, it's hard to take them out of the top spot after they've won 2 in a row. What does St. John Shrewsbury look like going into the season?
Yeah, so St. John Shrewsbury, I'll have them at 2. Interesting case this year. Charlie Eppinger's gone, stepped down last season. In comes Casey Cummins, '08 grad. He's been at, I believe, Sutton the last couple of years.
Right.
But, made the Final Four last year, fell to Taunton. No shame in losing to the eventual champions. That's who you'd like to go out to.
Right.
But, you get Noah Basgard back. He's a Stonehill guy. Brady Shea, so, they're going to solidifying the rotation there. Basgard's topping 90 miles an hour. Shea had a 188 ERA over the spring and summer. So kind of laying the foundation there on the mound.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you would build the team around if you could. You get your 2 starting pitchers that are, D1 prospects, 90-plus mile an hour arms. They're going to be really tough to beat, in the state tournament. The only way they could struggle, I guess, is maybe, if rain plays a factor and they have to play 3 games in a hurry and they don't have, access to those 2 guys. But I think St. John Shrewsbury, they're my number 1 to start the year. But you're the guy on the beat, and I don't blame you at all for picking Taunton. That's not a bad pick. What about BC High? They have some guys. I feel like every week their athletic director or their coach is sending me a D1 commit. What does BC High look like going into the year?
Yeah, BC High is one of those teams that even regardless of your knowledge of MIAA baseball, you just know they're good. They're always good no matter what.
Right.
Quarterfinals run last season, they fell to Taunton too. Again, just no one was getting in Taunton's way last season. They got some key returners coming back: Cole Bohane, Sam Keene, Liam Kineen. Bohane's a Tufts commit. He's at third base, Catholic Conference MVP last year. You also get junior Wyatt Miller, who hit 405 last year, slash 465, 443 in the regular season. You got a UMass commit in the outfield, Jackson Richard, and then Ivy League commits Keenan Kineen, or that's a mouthful. They're going to lead the pitching staff.
Yeah, Keenan Kineen. They're both. I feel like BC High just has a lot of college guys playing on that roster. They could be a really tough team this year, depending on their draw in the tournament and how they do in the Catholic Conference. Because it is, we had mentioned earlier, like with Zavarian and some of those other Catholic Conference, St. John's Prep, it's a loaded conference. It's hard to get your seed really high going into the MIA tournament out of that. But the Hockomock is like that too, with Franklin and Taunton and, King Philip, and some of those teams are really difficult to beat. Who else do you have in your top 10?
Yeah, so I have Andover High there, 15-6 last season. They fell to Methuen in their Cinderella run last year. They were 9-3 in close games. I think two runs or fewer, which was really kind of interesting stat about just sort of their ability to close out games. But some key losses, Braden Archambault, but they got Chris Gillette and Ryan Gillette, as the battery sort of coming back, the twins. And then you have Will Norris. He's a transfer from Central Catholic. He's committed to Wofford. Hit 445 last season. So sort of that could be a big key for them, sort of providing some juice into that team.
Yeah, Will Norris is a guy. He got selected for Team Massachusetts too. That's a team. It includes 7 prep school players, and I want to say it must be about so there are 18 guys on the roster. A couple guys are down at like IMG right now, but I would say there's probably like 8 guys who are going to be MIA players from Team Massachusetts this year. They have a really good roster. That team's going to be coached by Braintree coach Bill O'Connell, and he really loaded that roster up with some really good players. So of them, Will Norris at Andover High, and like you said, transferring from Central Catholic, that's a major player that kind of sways the balance a little bit in the Merrimack Valley. But yeah, he's a good one. Who else do you have after Andover?
Yeah, so I have Andover at 5, one spot ahead of them at 4. I have Milton High, reigning D2 champs. Another team that's sort of always in the mix no matter what, 22-3 last season, repeat champs. In a good spot to maybe three-peat, but they'll have to do it without Owen McHugh, who was our player of the year last year.
Right.
But they'll have Greg Lannon stepping in for Brendan Morrissey, who's off to Milton Academy. But we talked about in the prep pod how it really seems that a lot of the strengths of MIAA teams lie in the pitching staffs, and that seems to be the case with Milton. You have Scott Longo, and then also Tommy Mitchell. And Longo, as good as he was on the mound, also hit 377 at the plate last year.
Yeah, he's a great player. Where is he going to school? I forget.
Northeastern.
Northeastern. Okay, yeah. Another good Northeastern commit, a guy who's well-rounded, two-way player, but really good on the mound. I would imagine he'll probably be a pitcher once he gets to Northeastern. And they also have Tommy Mitchell, who wasn't healthy all of last year, but he did come back just in time for the state tournament. He's going to somewhere down south, I think like Elon. Elon. And so he's a really good prospect, left-hander. He throws hard. He, like I said, he wasn't healthy for most of the year last year, but he was back in the state tournament. I think he closed out their state championship win. So he'll be a good player for them. You can't go wrong picking Milton at number 4. They're probably the favorites in D2, even with the coaching change and the loss of Owen McHugh.
Yeah, and then coming in at 7, we'll have Westford Academy. Almost an undefeated season last year, 20-1, fell to Shrewsbury, or St. John Shrewsbury in the D1 Elite 8. One of the state's best pitchers, Jake Cullen, Rhode Island commit. He's on his way back. He was hitting the low 90s over the summer. You also got, Nick Bonica. He's a Bentley commit at catcher. And Assumption commit James McDermott's back too.
Yeah, the only thing I worry about with Westford Academy is they're kind of like the Gonzaga of the NCAA tournament, where you're like, they were close to undefeated, but they might not play the same strength of schedule as like the BC Highs. And so they almost finished undefeated last year. Then they ended up losing to St. John Shrewsbury. But they had Matt Marash, who ended up, he was like a late commit. He was at the end of the season last year, and then he committed as a 23. He was thinking of taking a PG year and going in to, kind of renewing his recruiting process. And then all of a sudden, Mike Gambino ended up going to Penn State from BC, and then got a commitment from Matt Marash to just start up this school year. So he's already been at Penn State for, most of this school year. So that was interesting. But yeah, Worcester Academy, they'll have a chance to have a really good regular season record again. And then it's just a matter of, was it a strong enough schedule to really be ready for the postseason?
Yeah. Coming in at 8, we'll have Zavarian, fell in the D1 Sweet 16 last year, another victim of Methuen's Cinderella run. But coming back, they got middle infielder Jackson Morse, George Mason commit. I believe he's going to be a junior. You got Luke Douglas, St. Anselm's. Morse was a Catholic Conference All-Star last season. You also got Charlie Camella, who's one of the more interesting players in like all of the MIAA. Committed to BC for football and baseball.
Wow. I didn't realize that. I thought it was just baseball, but that's impressive. Anytime you can go to an ACC school as a 2-sport athlete, that's impressive. They're really good going into this year. Another, those names that you mentioned, those are really good players. So yeah, don't be surprised. Zavarian won a state championship. I'm trying to figure out the year. It was either 2020 or it was 2021, because 2020 everything got wiped out due to the pandemic. So 2021, Zavarian won. So other than Taunton, they're the most recent D1 state champion. So you got to have them in the mix. That's a good spot for them at number 8.
Yeah, and then we'll have Mansfield coming at 9. 15 seed in D2 last year, but made it to Elite 8. 16-9 on the season. They had a lot of juniors, and a lot of them are back too. 14 seniors, maybe the most experienced team in the MIAA. And we talk about all the time on the hockey side how much experience matters, especially when you get to the tournament. You got Connor Curtis, threw over 50 innings last season. Jake Madak, another talented arm. And then you got Matt DeShiro, one of their best bats, coming back. Yeah,
Mansfield's going to be tough in D2. I wouldn't be surprised if it's between them, Milton, King Philip. Those are kind of the teams that it seemed to come down to last year, and I wouldn't be surprised if all 3 of them are right back this year.
Yeah, and then checking at 10, we got Whitman Hansen, 19-5 season D2 semifinalists under first-year coach Matt Henriksen. Another year for him, and they lost a lot of headliners last year, but they returned some of the bigger names, especially on the pitching staff. You got Evan Yakovanis, a senior, Ryan Baker, he's a junior, and you also got catcher Cam Beltramini back in the fold. So Whitman Hansen could be in line for another step this year. Yeah,
I like them as a kind of right around 10, also mentioned type of team. They could make some noise in D2. They're really tough. I'm trying to think who else I have as a potential team here that could be slip into the top 10. Let me take a look at my rankings, which aren't the official rankings. Obviously, those are yours. Let's see. Lincoln Sudbury I have in the mix. They have a really good catcher, Cooper Tarantino. who could be a really strong player for them this year in the dual county league. Who else do I have here as an option? I have St. John's Prep. They have Cam LaGrassa and Aiden Driscoll, both really good players. King Philip, I have in the also considered section. They went to the D2 state championship each of the last 2 years. So they're similar to Franklin. Like if it wasn't for Milton High, King Philip would be back-to-back state champion. So they're good. And then I have you went to Catholic Memorial, right?
No, MC, the other way around.
Oh, you went to Malden Catholic. Okay. So Leominster and Catholic Memorial, they're up there every year. Leominster's now at D2 program. Last year I think they went into the tournament as like the number 1 seed in D2. No, probably Milton did, but Leominster was up there for sure as like a 2 seed. And then Catholic Memorial is always good Catholic conference team in D1. So I have them in the mix as well.
Are you serious about playing your sport in college? Do you need a flexible education that allows you to maintain your practice and competition schedules while also preparing you to succeed at the next level? You should check out the University of Nebraska High School. UNHS is accredited and offers more than 100 online courses, including NCAA-approved courses to protect your academic eligibility. Students could earn a UNHS diploma or take a single course for transfer credit. Courses are college prep, self-paced, and available 24/7, 365. Enroll anytime and take up to a year to complete a course. Visit highschool.nebraska.edu today.
Looking to keep up with all the latest news and information on New England baseball? New England Baseball Journal and BaseballJournal.com are the premier resources for information and inspiration on the New England baseball scene. Have every issue of New England Baseball Journal, the magazine, delivered to your home or office. And don't forget to stay in the game every day with a digital subscription to BaseballJournal.com to receive baseball coverage on clubs, college commits, prep and high school, Division 1, 2, and 3 colleges, showcases, rankings, and much more. Get in the game and behind the scenes now by going to BaseballJournal.com. Just click on the subscribe button and start the subscription that is right for you today. New England Baseball Journal is a Seamans Media publication. Seamans Media. Inspiring, informative, insightful.
As we look towards individual standouts, you mentioned a lot of guys there in your top 10. Are there any guys that you didn't mention as potential standout pitchers in the MIAA this spring?
Yeah, I mean, someone at CM who we were just talking about, Brett Mulligan. He's a Northeastern commit. Had a good showing at Northeastern camp. Almost to 90. Hitting 89 miles an hour on his fastball. He's one guy to watch. I know we mentioned Scott Longo. You got whether it's Brady Shea, like we mentioned, Mikey St. Martin, who's at Walpole. Even when he's not on the mound, can hit to all fields. A little bit of a two-way prospect there, creeping up into the upper 80s with his fastball.
He's a good player for sure, yeah.
Yeah, Matthew Stewart at Chelmsford, another guy who's also kind of getting around to 90 with his fastball. And as a two-way player, too, has over triple-digit exit velocity at times. So those are some other guys to sort of highlight that might fly under the radar. Yeah,
he's a strong player for sure. Individually, if you look at Julio Solier, he's at Springfield Central. He's a Vanderbilt commit. But if you're in that Springfield area and you get a chance to go out to see him, it's worth your time because he's a really good player. St. John's Prep, I mentioned Cam LaGrassa. They also have William Shaheen, who's a 25. Really good player. He's with the show based out of somewhere in the Merrimack Valley. I want to say the show might be Andover or Lawrence or somewhere in there. Who else? Drew Scialdone was from Amesbury High last year. He's with the show New England. Really good prospect. And Anthony Ruggiero, who was a Team Massachusetts selection last year. He's going to go to Northeastern. Another good one you probably don't see as much with him because he's at Nipmuc Regional, who I have not seen them make a deep run in the tournament. So that's probably why his name doesn't pop up as much. Connor Murphy is from Newton South. He's a Boston College commit. And you mentioned Brett Mulligan, Tommy Mitchell, Scott Longo. Those are all good players. Ty Ledachevsky is a another Northeastern commit at Ashland High School. And let me give you one more. Tyler Kroppis is from Seekonk. They played in the state championship game last year. He did a really good job on the mound, so that's another commit for you. So let's go ahead and make some predictions.
Okay.
Now, your rankings, I would assume, are probably similar, online with your predictions. I said I had St. John Shrewsbury as my number one team. I don't know that I'd predict them to win the state championship. I just think based on talent, I put them at number one, but I don't know. It sounds like you think Taunton might be a three-time state champion after this year.
It's hard to ignore just the talent with Braden Calley and obviously the experience, like we've mentioned. I want to go with Franklin, like maybe this is the year, but I think I got to lean Taunton again.
I think I went Franklin last year. I thought Franklin was going to win all the way up until that championship game started. I was, they seemed to be in the driver's seat all year. And then once, you see Braden Calley step on the field and Taunton starts getting pitching performances from guys who are, under the radar. And you're like, man, Taunton every year. So I'm going to predict Taunton as a state champion. And so did you end up going with Franklin there or Taunton? Taunton. Okay.
Heart said Franklin, head said Taunton.
Yeah. Who do you think is going to be in the D1 semifinals? I'll give you mine. St. John Shrewsbury, Taunton, Franklin. Those three are the easy ones. I'm going to put BC High in that mix too.
Okay. Taunton, St. John Shrewsbury, Franklin, and then I wanted to do BC High, but for the sake of a little spiciness here, I'll say Xaverian.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good pick. I like them a lot. And in terms of under the radar teams, what team do you think could make some noise that isn't one of, I mean, we're picking pretty strong favorites. Is there anybody you think could make some noise outside of those, 4 or 5 teams?
Yeah. I think, you look at, little, not to be Catholic Conference biased here, but, just the parity and the quality of play. Those teams are always battle tested. I would say St. John's Prep and CM are definitely two to keep an eye on. Not necessarily under the radar because they're also kind of in the mix to kind of sneak into our rankings. But it's hard to ignore sort of, being battle tested when it comes down to the tournament. Yeah.
It's tough to say Leominster is an under the radar team because, like I said, they were probably the number 2 seed going into Division II last year. But they had a disappointing state tournament performance. I think they were one and done last year. Leominster, I think they got bounced in the first round. They have Angel Baez back. He's a really good left-handed arm, he's a right-handed arm for Leominster High, but he's a good player. I like Lincoln Sudbury too. I had mentioned Cooper Tarantino behind the plate. Wellesley could make a run with Tate Banish. He's a good two-way player. And then watch out for Bishop Fian. Brody Bumila. He's a 26, so he's only a sophomore. He's 6'7", 205, and he's been thrown in the 90s in the early part of this spring. GBG Northeast player, so watch out for him. Natick High has Jack Byrne, who could be a good player for them, and then Charlie Criscola is at Uxbridge High if you're looking for a lower division sleeper. But that is pretty much the gist of the MIAA season. And so let's go right to our producer David Yaz for our 3 up, 3 down segment.
All right, gentlemen, welcome back to 3 up, 3 down.
3 up, 3 down.
Today, my friends, we have 3 questions for each of you about the unwritten rules of baseball. So I have 3 questions I'm going to throw. We'll get your opinion on both. And then if we have time, we'll have a couple bonus unwritten rules. Unwritten rule number 1. Dan, you can go first. It's probably the most infamous or notorious one. Don't bunt during a no-hitter. Are you pro or con that unwritten rule?
I think it depends on the score. If it's 1-0 and you have a guy at the plate who might be able to bunt his way on, I'm okay with it. I think I don't know what the rule should be. Maybe if it's 4 runs, if it's 4-0, then you're not bunting anymore after like the 8th inning. But yeah, no, I've seen. I think Kurt Schilling had a no-hitter going one time and somebody bunted, and
he had a perfect game broken up by a bunt.
Yeah.
Bunt hit.
And I don't think he got that mad about it. Not that he's like the measure of.
Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy.
Yeah.
Well, from what we know now about him.
But yeah, I'm okay with it as long as it's like 1-0 in the 9th inning.
Pat?
I would agree. I think, if you still have a chance to get into the game or, make a comeback or win or what have you, I think, you're playing the game. You're trying to make a play to win the game or, get in position to tie. But if it's garbage time and you're down a lot at the end, it's what are we doing? Like,
I can see that, but if I were to argue for no unwritten rule at all, what I'd say is bunting, you have to make a good bunt to get a hit, just like you have to make a good hit to get a hit, you know? So it's not automatic. If it were automatic, everyone would bunt every time they're up. On the other hand, there is a sort of feel to the game, and it is deflating to see a pitcher lose a no-hitter on a bunt. So,
and it depends on like who is accepting that this is an unwritten rule, because if you're on the defensive side, your guy's on the mound throwing a no-hitter, and you're like, hey, the rule is no bunting now, and you play your first baseman and third baseman back, and then somebody's like, hey, I could just sneak in a bunt here because they're playing me back. Like then that's, you're kind of breaking the unwritten rule by taking advantage of the defense, thinking that you're honoring the unwritten rule.
Well, you could argue that the defense, though, is taking advantage of the unwritten rule
That's
by,
true, too.
Making it harder to get a hit by punting.
The counterpoint is just defense has to make a play.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's just it. And if you're positioned correctly, then you should be able to get that guy out. Anyway, all right, question number 2, Pat, you can go first. This is kind of a weird one, but don't ever step on the pitcher's mound or don't ever walk in front of the catcher. Those apparently are unwritten rules. You ever hear of those?
I've heard of the mound, I believe. Catcher, it's like, yeah, I get it if the guy's warming up. Like, you don't obviously get out of the way. But I don't know. I think that's pretty silly.
Yeah, I think the rule is more the pitcher and the catcher have some unseen karmic bond that you are not allowed to break. So when you're approaching, I think what it means is when you're approaching home plate, you walk behind the catcher. I don't know.
I think if that's throwing you off your game, you have other things to worry about.
It's true. Dan?
Yeah, I think I'm okay with that one. So you're saying like if you ground out and you're going to the third base dugout, don't run across the mound.
No, that's okay. I think, but people do that, right? I'm talking about when you approach home plate when you're up.
Yeah,
I think at that point,
don't walk in front of the catcher.
Right.
Yeah, no, I get that one. Because you could be. And you're signaling, or maybe you're trying to get in front of the signal and pick off a signal. I get that you want to, but what was the one? Don't walk on the mound.
Yeah, I guess don't ever step on the mound. I guess.
Like when you're running out to the field?
Yeah.
Oh, and going on defense.
I would do that all the time when I was younger.
Yeah.
Just run over the mound.
Yeah, I don't know. In Fenway Park, there used to be 4 carved out footprints where Wade Boggs would step the same 4 places every time when he came off the field. He was nuts.
Sounds like a Nomar thing to do.
True. All right. The third question for 3 up, 3 down. We're back to you, Dan. If you're a fan at a baseball game and you catch a foul ball and there's a little kid around, you have to give it to the kid. Fair or unfair?
Yeah, I think it's probably fair. I have kids now, so I guess I would appreciate it if somebody handed them the ball. And I'm not like a big collectibles guy. I have some stuff, some memorabilia or collectibles, but even at this point, I have like a big baseball card set that I had growing up, and now if I find out I have 2 girls, but if I find out, one of my friends has kids who collect baseball cards, I'll usually just bring a few baseball cards and give them to kids because I'm like, it's worth way more to them, and I don't know what I'm going to do with this stuff other than throw it away at some point.
Pat?
Yeah, I would also say, give it to the kid because, you make their day, you make a fan for life probably. So yeah,
have you ever caught a foul ball?
I've had a couple go through my fingers. One that I like bobbled, it came back and hit me in the chin because, I had the hands on it. My guy in front of me got in there like a cornerback making a play on a 50-50 ball. Mm-hmm.
So you didn't go home with either of those balls?
No, no.
So you're telling me now this season you go to Fenway and someone hits one into the stands and you make a nice play and you've got it, but there's a kid 2 rows in front who's turning around looking at you.
I'm hoping it's later in the game where all the kids have gone home already. Because that's usually when we're moving around to spots where you might get a foul ball. But yeah, if there's a kid right in front of me, I will. But if I make a good play and like it's not like kid's not like right in my immediate vicinity, I would probably hang on to it.
I mean, you only get I've caught maybe 2 in my lifetime, I think, and I don't like maybe if there was a kid sitting next to me the whole game and I was talking to him and things like that, sure, then it's a nice thing to do. But I don't think it should be a rule. If you can't catch a ball, that's special. It's supposed to be there, so.
Yeah, it's tough though when you see the times where like the kid turns around and like kind of expects it, and then you'd be the a-hole that doesn't give him the ball.
It's true.
Like the dad's like, "Oh, go ask if he's gonna give you the ball."
Yeah, I think the 2 rows is too much. I think it's got to be a kid that you've been interacting with throughout the game that's sitting next to you or something. Then you're okay. But yeah, I'm not looking for a kid all in my section after I catch a foul ball. If there's one that's I've had some engagement with already during the game, okay, here's the ball.
My dad had a thing I probably mangled the story, but he got there was a bouncing ball and it went right to him and he caught it. But then it was like he bobbled it a little bit, and for a moment the ball sort of looked like it was between him and this little kid. And so my dad controls it. He looks at that little kid and then he turns around to apparently give it to another kid, but you couldn't really tell from the angle most people were watching. So he got booed vociferously it looked like he took it away from the little kid. So, this whole game is fraught with peril.
I've seen those like Instagram reels where a baseball player will kind of walk over to the fence and then toss it to a kid, and then some adult will reach in front of the kid and grab it and then like storm back to their seat.
Yeah.
You can see those people getting booed.
I mean, there was a whole 30 for 30 documentary about catching Sammy Sosa's 60th home run. If the dudes outside of Wrigley Field who are like positioning and like there were fights for them.
Oh yeah.
And at some point it's like, all right, lighten up everybody.
Same thing with Bonds' ones that went into McCovey Cove. They'd all be out there in their kayaks and flipping each other over.
Yeah. It's a baseball. It's worth about $7. Right. We'll do a few just sort of lightning round ones. Don't steal bases or swing at 3-0 pitches if you're up by a large margin. Pat, yay or nay?
Oh, man. Stealing bases, I think 3-0 pitch. If the guy's going to let it hang there, like just take it for a ride.
Yeah.
Make a better pitch.
Dan?
I hate taking pitches. I hated doing it when I was playing, and I'm fine. Swing away.
Previous podcast.
Don't be losing so badly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, previous podcast, Dan's on record as saying he ignored his coach's signal so he could swing at pitches in Little League. Pitchers relieved mid-inning must stay in the dugout until the end of the inning. Dan, you ever hear of that one? I guess it's more common sense, but
yeah, like as you say it, I'm thinking about like the pitcher who just got removed, sitting in the dugout, the camera's on him, and he's kind of reacting like, "Oh, I'm gonna inherit these 2 runs because I didn't know it was a rule though. Yeah, no, I'm okay with them if they want to go to the clubhouse and get out of the camera shot. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, it's all about the camera shot because whenever inevitably, like I'll remember your beloved Phillies, Dan. I remember it became a thing when Curt Schilling was yanked from the game in the postseason, and Mitch Williams comes in and he's walking the whole stadium, and they kept cutting to Curt Schilling, who was pissed as hell. But who wouldn't be? Yeah,
it's true.
Pat, your thoughts on that one?
I would say stay in the dugout. Be a teammate, and you're a public figure. Like goalies, if they get pulled in an NHL game, have to sit on the bench, cameras on them.
Yeah. That's a weird thing in baseball. I don't think
it's any different than that.
Yeah, that's a weird thing in baseball that some players will go to the clubhouse, the locker room, because you don't do that in basketball if you foul out.
Don't do that in any other sport.
There. Yeah, it's true.
I didn't even. Go ahead.
You could get some of your teammates to stand in front of the camera for you, or find a spot in the dugout where you just won't be seen. Just go hide in the corner or something.
Right.
I didn't even realize that was a thing until the chicken and beer thing with Bobby Valentine. Yeah. Once that, or it was a year before Bobby Valentine. I guess it was still Francona, right? In his last year.
I think you're right.
Yeah, and so I was like, you're telling me these guys, when they're not starting, are just hanging out, eating fried chicken, not supporting their team. I didn't even realize that was allowed.
It doesn't seem to make sense. Yeah, you're right, and you're right, Pat. There's no other sport in football. Yeah. In football, if your quarterback gets relieved, he doesn't leave. He has to sit there and take it like a man and put on a headset and grab a clipboard or something.
Except for Antonio Brown. Remember, he ripped his jersey off and left the field.
That was the actions of an insane man. Yes. And I don't mean to put down Antonio Brown and his troubles, or maybe I do. Let's put him aside. All right, I'll give you one more, just final quickie, which I hadn't heard this one before. Don't swing at the first pitch after the pitcher has allowed back-to-back home runs. Dan, you ever hear that one? No,
and I would not be in
You think
favor of
it's
that.
BS,
Yeah,
right?
Go back-to-back if you can there. The pitcher's on the ropes.
Yeah, swing away.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
how you get, like, I don't know if any of them were on the first pitch or not, but there was that Red Sox game X amount of years ago against the Yankees, 3 in a row.
It was 4 in a row.
4 in a row, yeah.
Yeah, you're right. And I think a couple of those might have been off the first pitch. Yeah, exactly. We're playing here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
This is a professional sport. Make better pitches.
Yeah, pitch better. You just gave up 2 home runs. Come up with something different or waste one, you know?
I've heard of if you're a leadoff hitter hitting behind a pitcher, you take a pitch or you take until the first strike to give the pitcher time to like sit down and get off their feet. And so you're not rushing them right back out to the mound. But yeah, I've never heard after back-to-back home runs, you take a pitch. That's crazy.
Yeah, come on. Well, you've both done very well in 3 up, 3 down. And at some point, we'll compile the Base Path Podcast Constitution of Unwritten Rules. But not today. Back to you, Dan.
All right. Thanks to Pat Donnelly for joining us again on the Base Path Podcast. Rate, review, subscribe to the Base Path Podcast on your preferred platform. Thanks to our producer, David Yaz. The Base Path Podcast is a Seamans Media production.